come here today to ask questions, so I thought I might spend just a few minutes exploring what makes a good question and what makes a good opportunity to ask a question. But before we do that, let me start with a very, very simple question. Where are you all from? I've heard we have people from all over Scotland, so let's see, do we have anyone from the north, Inverness, Aberdeen? Yeah, yes, hello. What about slightly further south, Dundee? Anyone? Oh, quite a few from Dundee. Are you all ready with questions? Yeah, that's a serious yes, good. Let's think Edinburgh. We must have people from Edinburgh. All over the place, yeah. Are we ready with questions? Yes. Good. Oh, yes. Excellent. Glasgow, what about over in the west? Oh, you're always the noisiest. Good, well, welcome. What about the Scottish borders, Dumfries and Galloway? Yes, Scottish borders? Yep, great. Dumfries and Galloway, I saw at the back. Ayr? Any of the islands? Good, well, we've got a great representation from across Scotland, which makes this a really special gathering, doesn't it? So well done for coming here, well done for making the journey, and just make the most now of the experience. So my background in relation to thinking through asking questions, I was a journalist and I was a television presenter. And so I've been trained on how to ask questions. And being able to interview a politician is a very rare, unique experience, even for people who are journalists. It's quite unusual that you'd get to ask questions to someone in that position, particularly in an environment like this, where it's open access, where you're literally this close to the First Minister. So this is an opportunity for you to really enjoy something that I have never seen happen before. I've never seen anything like this, where a politician, someone in that position, would spend not just the time, but create an environment like this where you are really able to ask questions in an informal way. So let's think then about what it takes to ask a good question. Hands up if you think you're good at asking questions. One person, 2, 3. Well done, those who think they are good. Let me share a secret with you. You're all brilliant at asking questions because you've been doing it since you were babies. From when you're born, you're asking questions, and then you become toddlers, and you say, why, all the time. And if you know little children, you'll know that's what they do. And then you get a little bit older, and you become a little bit less curious because things become quite normal. And you realise that people don't like being asked questions all the time, so you kind of stop asking all the time. But really, you mustn't. You must always ask questions. You must always question why something is the way it is, and should it be that way, and can you do something about it? So you're all good at asking questions, there's no doubt. Let's then think, what makes a good question? First thing is, you've got to know who you're interviewing. I'm assuming you all know who you're interviewing. Can you shout out? Nicola Sturgeon. Nicola Sturgeon, First Minister. Excellent. And I'm assuming you'll have done some homework and you'll have looked into who Nicola Sturgeon is. Yes? Hands up if you spent a bit of time looking to see who Nicola Sturgeon is and what is the job of the First Minister. Yes? Yep, good. Well done. A little bit of research can go a long way when you're doing an interview. But also when you're thinking about who you're interviewing, you should be thinking about what's going on in the world. And what's going on in the world is really important. So what's going on in your school, what's going on in your community, what's going on in Scotland, but what's going on outside of Scotland. And these influences and themes can guide how you ask and shape questions. But asking questions is easy, because all you have to really know is what you're passionate about. What do you care about? And everyone is passionate about something. So whatever it is that is close to your heart, you should be asking about that, because that's the question that will be the most powerful for you to ask. And if you want to ask a powerful question, you should also set it in context. So tell a bit of a story. Don't just ask a cold question. Spend just a few sentences explaining to the First Minister why you're asking this, why you care, why this matters, why this is important, why you are here today is important, and the questions you ask are important. So set the scene. Explain who you are and why you're the right person to be asking these questions. Ask open questions. Are you well is a closed question, so that would be yes or no. We don't really want yes or no answers from the First Minister. We want her to explain and share. And so if you ask an open question, she's far more likely to do that. And then I suppose for some of you, when you ask your question, you'll then take your foot off the pedal and think, okay, that's me done. I've done it, I've asked my question. But the thing is, that's just when the fun starts. Because once you've asked your question, you then have to listen. You have to listen to the answer and you have to stay focused. Because the First Minister might not answer the question in the way that you had hoped. Or she might say something that makes you think of something else. So you may need to have a follow-up question. But you can only have a follow-up question if you've listened to her answer. And then finally, and this is maybe one of the most important things, is your tone. Your tone is vital. When you're asking questions, tone makes a difference. And I know that because I have young children, and one of them can say to me, "Mummy, I want a biscuit." And I'll say, "Well, no." And then she'll go away and she'll say to her, "Daddy, I want a biscuit." And he'll say, "Oh, how many?" And so you can see that she used the same words in the same order, but she had a different outcome. So your tone is important, and your tone is something you can control. So today you choose. You can mumble questions, and you can sound like a timid little mouse, or you can ask confidently, because you're the right people to be in this room and to be asking these questions. So be bold and be confident. Today is an opportunity to step up. It's an opportunity to speak up. And some of you will feel really confident about this. And some of you will feel okay about it. And some of you will be sitting thinking this is a bit much and slightly overwhelming. And maybe you're not the right person to be here. But I've worked with thousands and thousands of young people across the country, and I know that the young people who often think they have nothing to say or won't ask a good question are the ones that must be heard. So if you're sitting thinking this maybe isn't for you, trust me, this is perfect for you. So enjoy the moment, enjoy this opportunity, and when you leave today, when you walk back through those doors, remember that today you stood up, you asked questions, and that you deserve to be heard, and you will make a difference. Give yourself a massive round of applause. And now to welcome onto the stage Louise from YoungScot.
Oh, I've got whistles as well. That's very exciting. Hello, how are we all doing? All right this morning? Okay, who got up before 5 o'clock? Nobody. Oh, that's good. Oh, no, there is one. Okay, who are you? You all right? Good. And who got up before 6? Okay, 7. Who's actually still in their bed, hasn't woken up yet? Yeah, 1 or 2. Okay, brilliant stuff. There's always one. Right, I'm delighted to see you all here today. Really excited. It's been fantastic to watch the Twitter stream getting all lively already and ready for all of your kind of questions. This is just your opportunity to just go for it, basically. So I'm Louise from YoungScot, and we've kind of been helping to kind of host this event. I hope you've all kind of been using your YoungScot cards. If you haven't, you're missing out, but come and talk to me about that later. And we really want you to kind of enjoy this and take this opportunity to ask as many questions as you can, but also know that any question that you don't get asked today, you will still get answered using the piece of paper and online, okay? So I'll come back to that at the end. But my job is to introduce the First Minister. So I'm going to welcome to the stage First Minister of Scotland, Nicola Sturgeon, who's been First Minister since 2014. She is Scotland's first ever female First Minister. Come on, girls, that's it, lovely. You know, she represents Glasgow South Side. Thank you. I knew the Glasgow, I heard you earlier, I knew you lot were noisy. She's also an amazing sports fan. If you follow Nicola Sturgeon on Twitter, you'll see that she's also kind of tweeting about Andy Murray and the tennis and the rugby, but also recently she just became the first patron of the Scottish women's football team as well, so she's their kind of patron. Yes, all good. And one of the key things, and I think this has been one of the kind of defining kind of factors, I think, in Nicola Sturgeon's tenure as First Minister, is how open and accessible she has been in terms of social media and engagement on social media, and also on events like this, and actually kind of wanting to kind of spend time with young people and hear directly from you what matters to you. So, without further ado, please welcome Nicola Sturgeon.
everybody. You've been a wee bit quiet so far. Make some noise. The noisiest group, when I was standing backstage and you were all being asked where you were from, the noisiest group, not surprisingly, were the folk from Glasgow. Where are you? Excellent. Look, it is absolutely fantastic to have you all here today. I've been really enjoying reading all your tweets as I've been sitting backstage. There's lots and lots of great tweets, but I think my favourite has to be the tweet from Crieff High School. Because Crieff High School have brought their own homemade brownies today. So my question to you is, have you kept one for me? Yes. Excellent. I look forward to getting that later on. Look, today is your opportunity to make your voice heard. This is a chance for you to ask me questions. That's why we've called it Ask the FM. You can ask me absolutely anything you want today. So don't feel shy. Don't feel embarrassed, worried that maybe your question is a daft one. There are no daft questions today. If it's something that matters to you, if it's in your mind, if you want to know my answer to it, then now and today is your opportunity to ask that question. So no holds barred, okay? Happy with that? Okay, excellent. You know, this year is the first time ever in Scotland that 16 and 17-year-olds are going to be able to vote in a national election. And the decision to lower the voting age was actually agreed by every single political party in the Scottish Parliament. So the SNP agreed it, the Labour Party agreed it, the Conservative Party agreed it, the Lib Dems agreed it, the Greens agreed it. There was unanimous support for giving 16 and 17-year-olds the chance to vote. And that followed on from the experience that we all had in the independence referendum, because young people on both sides of the independence debate demonstrated that they were thoughtful, educated, passionate citizens that we always knew you would be. So extending the vote for future elections actually was quite an easy decision to take. And it was based on a very, very clear principle. We want you to have a say in the kind of country that you're going to grow up in. You are the future of this country. So it's right that you get the opportunity to shape this country as much as anybody else does. So whatever your views are today, whatever political party you support, even if you support no political party, whatever causes you might feel passionate about, all I'm going to do is encourage you to take the opportunity to make your voice heard. Get involved in the debate and, most importantly of all, make sure you use your right to vote. And today's event, as I've already said, is all about you having your say. Most of the time we've got this morning is devoted to letting you ask questions. So as I've already made clear, ask any questions you want, and I'll do my best to answer them. If I don't, as you were told earlier on, if I don't answer them in the way you think I should, if you don't think I'm being full enough in my answers, or if you think I'm doing that usual politician thing and dodging the question, come back at me. Don't let me off the hook. Feel free to press me as hard as you can. So I'm not going to speak for too long this morning at the outset. I just want to make some brief initial comments. What I really just want to do this morning is set out some of my priorities for young people across our country. And the overall aim we've got as the Scottish Government is a simple one. We want Scotland, this country that we all share, to be the best place in the world to grow up in. And that desire for Scotland to be the best country in the world to grow up in drives a lot of our other policies, whether that's providing support to mothers while they're pregnant, or whether it applies to expanding early years education, or working with councils to improve attainment in our schools. All of these things are driven by our desire to make sure this country that you're growing up in, this country that your wee brothers and sisters will grow up in, is genuinely the best one in the world. We want young people, when they leave school, to be able to take up the kinds of learning or job opportunities that suit you best, whether that's going to university or going to college or getting a job or getting an apprenticeship. Indeed, one of the first things that this Scottish Government did when we came to office back in 2007 was to reintroduce free university education in Scotland, because we believe that everybody in society benefits from the knowledge and the skills that young people get at university. So society as a whole should meet the cost of young people going to university, because it's an investment not just in your future, but it's an investment in the future of the whole country. So as long as I'm First Minister, let me tell you, there will not ever be tuition fees in Scotland, because your ability to go to university should depend on how clever you are, not on how rich your parents might be. We're also increasing the number of modern apprenticeships, because university is not for everybody. And we want to make sure that employers ensure that apprenticeships are providing people with the skills they need and the skills that businesses need if they're going to grow and prosper in the future. Another issue we're looking at is gender stereotypes. You know, how successful, and I believe this very strongly, it won't surprise you to hear this, how successful you are in life, what careers you're able to pursue, shouldn't depend on whether you're a boy or a girl. It should depend on how good you are and what it is you want to do. You know, if you look at, for example, apprenticeships in energy and engineering, these are really important areas of our economy for the future. But last year, only 4% of the young people taking up apprenticeships in these areas were girls. Now, there are hugely talented girls and young women across the country, many of them here today, for whatever reason, will decide not to choose subjects and careers that they're probably really well suited for, because they think that's not the kind of careers that girls and women pursue. So we want to change that. We want more young women to become engineers and scientists, and we want more young men to go into professions like childcare. What matters is your ability, the dreams you have, the desire you have to succeed, and how hard you're prepared to work. Your success shouldn't be based on old-fashioned ideas about what are jobs for girls and what are jobs for boys. So all of that is part of our wider work to promote youth employment. The Scottish Government has got a guarantee in place that anybody under the age of 20 who isn't in employment or education gets offered a learning or a training opportunity. And that's really important, because we don't want any young person leaving school and having nowhere to go or nothing to do with their lives. And that's all having a lot of success. At the moment, youth employment in Scotland is higher than it is in the rest of the UK. But we've still got to do much more, because right now, 1 in 6 young people in Scotland are unemployed. And that's far too high. I don't want to see any young person unemployed. And we're taking a further step today to help young people back into work. Because sometimes not having money because you don't have a job can in itself be a barrier to getting a job, because it might mean you don't have the money to buy the clothes you need for a job or the money to pay for the transport to get to work every day. So what we plan to do is introduce a back-to-work grant for 16 to 24-year-olds who've been unemployed for more than 6 months. And that will provide young people with grants, one-off grants, that will help them prepare for work, buying the clothes they need or getting the money they need to travel by bus or by train to work. Practical support to help young people get into the jobs that they want. And that focus on youth employment is part of the aim that I've already talked about, making sure all of you and every young person across our country has a fair chance to succeed. And one issue we are looking at here is about access to university. I've already spoken about how important it is to me, because I benefited from a free education when I was your age. So it's really important to me to make sure that there are no tuition fees for people who want to go to university. And that's an essential part of making sure we've got fair access to university. But you know what? It's not enough in and of itself. We've got to do more than that. You know, right now, 18-year-olds from the most deprived areas of our country are 4 times less likely to go to university than 18-year-olds from the least deprived areas of our country. No society should tolerate that kind of inequality, and we're not going to tolerate it. So we appointed last year a commission to come up with recommendations on how we increase the proportion of young people from our poorest areas who get the chance, if they want to go on to university. It proposed strict targets so that by the time a young person at school today is of university age, they have an equal chance of going to university, whether they come from a rich area or a poor area of our country. And we've accepted those targets, and now we're working hard to make sure we can meet them. And to give just one example of how we're doing that, we know that young people who throughout their young lives have been in care or who've had experience of being in care are even less likely to go to university. So from 2017 onwards, we're going to ensure that young people who've been in care, who meet the basic entry requirements from university, are guaranteed the offer of a place at university. And we're also going to guarantee them a bursary of almost £150 a week to level the playing field, to make sure that the disadvantaged young people who have a care experience suffer doesn't follow them throughout their whole lives. So that's an example of the kind of practical action we're taking to try to make sure that no matter where you come from, no matter your background, you've got an equal chance to succeed. You know, I was really lucky when I was growing up. I had parents who instilled the belief in me that if I wanted to achieve something, if I worked hard enough, then I could achieve it. I want every young person to have exactly the same chances in life that I had. And as part of that, it's important that your voice is heard. It's not good enough for governments alone to decide what's right for you and for the next generation. You've got to tell us what matters to you and your generation. And that's what today is all about. So it's now over to you. As I said earlier, don't be quiet, don't be shy. Ask me whatever you want, and I'll do my best to answer your questions, because you are the future of this country. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, First Minister. So I'm going to take some questions. Okay, so hands up if you have a question. I didn't think we would be short. And we have microphones as well. So we've got some microphones. So if you can wait till the microphone comes to you, say who you are and then what your question is. And will we take them one at a time, or do you want them clustered? We'll do one at a time and see how we go. Okay. Now I am left-handed, so I'm going to go this way. Okay. So in the back row there. Yeah. No. Here. There you go. Hand up. Yeah.
Oh, me. Okay. Sorry. Once the new Scotland Bill is passed, will the Scottish Government have enough powers to close the attainment gap in Scotland, as well as reduce the wealth gulf between the rich and poor?
Well, I think we have and will have a lot of powers to try to make sure we're closing the attainment gap. The attainment gap, as most of you will know, is the gap in school achievement between young people in our poor areas and young people in our rich areas. Now, we've got responsibility over schools and the education system, and we've already outlined a lot of changes we want to make to try to close that attainment gap. And just last week I announced a lot of new money that we'll invest over the next 5 years as well, to make sure that we're getting money direct to schools in the areas that's most needed. I guess, though, the one thing I would say is that closing the attainment gap, it depends on what we do in our schools. But obviously, there's more to it than that, because some of the reasons lying behind the gap in attainment are reasons that go way beyond the school gate. It's about poverty and disadvantage that young people often experience in the family environment, the community environment they grow up in. So we still, although we're getting more powers over the social security system and the tax system, a lot of these powers will still lie with Westminster. So I hope over the next few years we'll see more of them come to Scotland so that we can do even more. But the pledge I will give you is that as long as I'm First Minister, I'll use every power I possibly can to try to make sure that every young person, regardless of your background and regardless of where you come from, gets the best chance to succeed in life, because you deserve that.
Thanks.
Got a hand up next. Okay. There. Okay, on the aisle there. Yeah.
Out of 129 MSPs, there's only 2 from ethnic minority backgrounds, both male Pakistani. Do you think this represents the diverse population of Scotland? And I'd like to know what the SNP are doing to get more of these young people from ethnic minority backgrounds more involved in politics?
No, I don't think it's good enough. I want to see a parliament that is as representative as possible of Scottish society. And that means having more people from ethnic minorities. It means having more women than we've got just now. It means having more people with disabilities because, you know, our parliament should reflect the society that we live in. Now, to be fair, the Scottish Parliament's better than many other parliaments on all of these fronts, and we do have two ethnic minority members of the Scottish Parliament. One of those is an SNP member, one's a Labour member. You're right, they're both Muslim, they're both men, and we've got to broaden that much, much further. So we elected at the general election last year from the SNP a woman Muslim to the House of Commons. We've got to go much further now. My responsibility in that is to make sure my party's procedures don't pose any barriers to people getting selected on merit. And we've been working really hard to do that, and other parties have to do that as well. But we've also got to then work at the grassroots with different communities to make sure that people come forward and see getting elected to Parliament as something that is there for them and an aspiration for them. So I'm committed to working with your community and with all of the different communities that make up our country to continue progress towards having a parliament that is as representative as possible.
What kind of things are you looking to do, like the SNP?
Well, we've done some of the stuff we've done to get more women into Parliament. We've got more women selected for this election than we've ever had before. Some of the things we've done there, we want to do now with ethnic minority groups as well, and that means mentoring schemes. It means working in our local branches and constituencies to encourage people to come forward, then make sure they've got the right support and induction and mentoring so that they can navigate the party processes. Sometimes it will mean, and we've done this for gender, sometimes it will mean having distinct positive action rules in place. So we had a rule for women when we were selecting our candidates for this election that said if a MSP was standing down, then we had to have a gender-balanced shortlist to select the replacement. So these kind of things are things I want to see us use, not just for gender, but to make sure that we get people from all backgrounds into our list of candidates.
Well, specifically for ethnic minority backgrounds, you have organisation like Career, you have organisation like SAFI, but they aren't exactly active. I don't see a lot of work being put in through them.
Well, I know some of these. I represent the south side of Glasgow, which is probably the most ethnically diverse constituency in the whole of the country, actually. So I know a lot of these organisations, and I think they do a lot of good work. I think we could support them to do even more good work. And we've got to support people, whether they do it through an organisation or individually. We've just got to encourage more people to come forward. One of the good things, one of the advantages we've got in Scotland, and it's sometimes seen as a disadvantage, is that we're quite a small country. And sometimes you can get together and solve problems in a way that in a much bigger country, it's much harder to do. So I think this is something that is doable if we all work together to do it.
Okay, so down the front here, there you go.
The purpose of school is to prepare young people for a world outside. Public Park is a school that supports children with additional support needs. The cuts to the social care budget will affect schools like ours very badly. Is there something that can be done so that local councils don't cut the money that is used for people with additional support needs?
Well, I would hope, what was the name of your school? I didn't catch it.
Public Park School.
Okay, I would hope councils would make a priority of schools that were supporting people with learning disabilities. And certainly the government wants to make sure we're working with councils and others to support schools and other groups in our society that are helping people that need most help to go on and live fulfilling lives. Now, two specific things I would say in addition to that general statement is social care, both for young people and for elderly people, because we've got lots of people living much longer these days, is an area that we've got to invest more money in, and that's what we want to try to do. And sometimes that will mean getting money out of the health service, where it's tied up in institutional care, and into support for people in the community. And we started that process through bringing health and social care together and transferring money out of the health budget into social care. But my second point goes back to something I was talking about in relation to the question over here, about the money that we have We're making reforms to local taxes to raise some more money for education. And we're going to direct that extra money into the areas of our school system that need it most, where schools are working in deprived areas or with young people with particular needs, so that we're making sure that support is there for all young people to get the best chance in life. Because all of what I'm saying to you today about wanting every young person to have the best chance in life, if that's going to become a reality, then we absolutely have to make sure that schools like yours get the support that they need.
We've got questions coming in on Twitter, so I'm just going to take one of the Twitter questions. So this is from Zoe Mason, and Zoe has asked about why isn't there a 16 to 25-year-old mental health service? Why are child and adolescent mental health services failing to provide adequate talking therapies, and waiting times are too long? So an answer for Zoe.
That's a really good question, Zoe. I hope you're watching somewhere so you can hear this answer. We do have to do a lot more to improve mental health services, not just for young people. We've got to do more to improve mental health services for people of all ages. We have more people working in mental health than previously. We're investing more in mental health. One of the challenges we've got is that demand for mental health services is increasing all the time. That's actually quite a good thing. In fact, it's a very good thing, because it means the stigma that's for a long, long time been associated with mental health is reducing. People are finding it much easier to come forward for help if they've got mental health problems. And that's a good thing, but it means we've got to make sure that the services available are expanding to keep up with that demand. And that's why a couple of months ago I announced some extra money that we're investing in mental health services to improve access and increase access to psychological therapies, and to try to reduce waiting times for people waiting. And we'll continue to invest more in mental health throughout the next Parliament if we continue to be the government. Because, I mean, I was Health Secretary for a while, and I think this is getting better, but for a long, long, long time, mental health has been the poor relation of the health service, and we've got to change that. We are changing it, but we've got to change it even more, because the statistic is that about 1 in 4 people in our country will experience mental health problems at some point of their life. So it's absolutely vital that we've got a health service that can treat people and treat people quickly. The last thing you want, and this is what we've got to continue to work to make sure isn't the case, the last thing you want, if somebody gets the courage to come forward for help, and then they find that they don't get that help, or they have to wait an awful long time for that help, so they go away again and don't come forward in the future. If somebody manages to come forward for help, it's our job to make sure that they get help quickly, and that's what we're working on doing.
Hi, I'm dyslexic and I've recently left school. I was wondering why the schools seem to be so clueless when it comes to dyslexia and how to deal with it. Quite often there's a lack of trained teachers, especially within primary schools, and there's definitely a huge gap in the teacher training programme, which teaches how to handle people with dyslexia and how to teach them properly and get their skills up there. So I was wondering if there's anything in the future that's going to combat this issue.
Yeah. Next one along. Do you want to pass the microphone to the next person? Okay, go for it.
As you know, Donald Trump could be the new president of America, and personally his extreme views do anger a lot of people. Would you welcome him to Scotland?
I'll come back to that question. Let me take the question about dyslexia, because it's a really important issue. And you've asked me specifically about dyslexia, and there are a range of very specific issues around dyslexia. But actually, there's a more general point to your question as well, is how we support, in the mainstream education system, young people who've got additional needs. But on dyslexia, we give, as the government, we give funding to an organisation called Dyslexia Scotland, who they do a lot of things, but amongst Sorry? Well, you know then. Sir Jackie Stewart, do you know who I mean? The racing driver who works very closely with Dyslexia Scotland. He works very hard to raise awareness of these issues with the Scottish Government. And as you know, some of the things that we're trying to do is make sure that teachers have awareness and training, and not just leave that to working with teachers once they're in classrooms, but to try to make sure teacher training properly takes account of the training teachers need to deal with young people with dyslexia. There's also a lot of work I think that we need to do, and do much more than we do just now, with young people to stop them, perhaps ending up in prison, because there's quite a frightening proportion of people in our prisons will have dyslexia, and working with people in prisons. So this is a big, big area, and I'm really keen that we work more closely with Dyslexia Scotland to see how we improve what we're already doing, because whether it's dyslexia or any other particular need a young person's got, our aim and ambition should be to make sure that doesn't hold you back. I still have a cousin who's now well out of school, but she is dyslexic, and saw firsthand, this is many years ago now, some of the challenges that she had going through school. So these are really important issues for us. And if I keep talking, I can maybe avoid getting on to the next question. There is there's a sort of convention, okay, that leaders of a government in one country are not meant to comment on elections in another country, because it's not diplomatic. I'm going to break that convention right now, okay? I really hope Donald Trump doesn't become president of America. It's not up to me, it's not up to us, it's up to the people of America, and, all I'd say is the first woman First Minister. It would be nice at some point to have the first woman President of America as well, but that's a personal opinion. I find many of Donald Trump's views really abhorrent, particularly the views he's expressed about the Muslim community. So it's up to America. I hope, and I actually believe that the good sense of the American people, a great country, great people, will prevail here, and we won't have the particular issue to confront that you spoke about. So let's keep our fingers crossed.
Obviously, you're a huge, strong female role model to many young women out there, including myself and my friend here. But do you believe that there's enough strong female leads within education, and that does enough to encourage girls? Coming from a school personally, who's female, who headmaster told us that we're failing because we're girls and we give up extremely easily.
Okay, I might need to have a word with that headmaster. Anybody, and I'm speaking to everybody here, but I'm unashamedly going to speak particularly to the young women in the audience. Don't ever, ever, ever let anybody tell you that there is anything in this world that you can't do if you want to do it just because you're a girl. There might be many things in this world that you can't do because it's not where your particular ability lies, or you don't have the skills to do, or it's not what you want to do. But there's nothing you can't do because you're a girl. And just because you might want to do something that girls have tended not to do in the past, and there might not be many women doing this particular job, don't let that put you off either. Be the trailblazer. Be the first person, be the pioneer to do it. So, the sky is your limit, and, don't let any glass ceiling stand in your way. So that's my message to you. Are there enough strong female role models out there? No, there aren't yet. There's more than there used to be, but we've still got work to do to get more women into leadership positions in every single sector of our society. The good news is it's changing for the better, but we've got to keep it moving forward. I don't want, I've got a wee niece who's 10, and I've got this, and the day I became First Minister, I kind of made this promise to her and to her generation. By the time she and her pals are my age, I want all of these things that we still talk about, the gender pay gap and occupational segregation and the fact that some things are seen as off limits for women. I want all of that to be nothing she has to worry about because we fixed all that in this generation. So as long as I've got anything to do with it, I will do everything I can to make sure that your opportunities in life are not limited by whether you're a boy or a girl. It's down to how big your dreams are and how good you are and how hard you're willing to work. And I'm absolutely sure nobody, headmaster or otherwise, will ever hold you back from your dreams.
I think you might need to invite the FM to come into your school, actually. That would be the thing to do. We're going to go to another question from Twitter, and this is from Cameron. Cameron's actually put a couple of questions, but they probably run together. So Cameron is asking about what measures should be taken to stop hate crime and bigoted bullying within schools, and in particular he's concerned about how trans young people are supported.
Okay, that's a really good question. We should have, whether it's in schools, in workplaces, in society generally, we should have a complete zero tolerance of prejudice and bullying and bigotry, whether that's about the colour of somebody's skin or their gender or their sexuality. We've got to send a very strong message that bullying based on prejudice is not acceptable. Bullying in any form is not acceptable, but prejudice and prejudice-based bullying can never be tolerated. Now, there's a lot of things we've got to do to make that a reality. We've got to make sure, and this applies not just to schools, that we've got the right laws in place so that if people are being prejudiced or committing crimes, hate crimes, then through the courts they're treated like that and they're actually treated more seriously because of that. We've got to make sure that in schools young people feel supported and don't feel that there's nobody to turn to or there's nothing they can do if they're victims of bullying, and that means having the right culture in schools, the right support in schools, teachers with the right training and awareness to spot that. And it means people like me, frankly, standing up and saying whether you're gay, lesbian, trans, whether you're Asian, black, whether you're a boy or a girl, you are equal to everybody else, and prejudice and discrimination and bullying will simply not be tolerated. And we've got to take every opportunity to make sure that message gets out there loudly and clearly.
I'm now looking for the super enthusiastic hands who are going to cry if they don't get to ask their question. Who's that? Okay, you're waving your hand at me. So microphone's here. First mic runner, fast. No, this one here. Who's coming? Yes, run faster. Let's get the mic along to you. Okay.
Hi Nicola, how you doing? I'm Mustafa. Basically, my question is, people who aren't British and studied in UK, or they're not European either, however, they studied through primary to the end of high school in here and applied to university through UCAS and the Scottish system. Shouldn't they get free education like the rest of the British people? The reason I'm asking this is because I'm not a British citizen. However, I'm on a student visa, but I finished all my education in the UK, in Scotland. But I am not allowed to get free education like the rest of the British people or Scottish people. So I just want, if you have any opinions on that.
I am happy to look into not just your particular case, but the kind of situation that your case represents. The general rule is that access to free education in Scotland is based on your what's called domicile in Scotland, but clearly there may be differences depending on your immigration status. And we in Scotland, and I don't know whether this will be the case with your case, I'm not trying to say there's nothing we can do about it, but sometimes when things are related to somebody's immigration status, there's a limit to what the Scottish Government can do about it because immigration rules are set at Westminster. But I'm very happy if you can, I'll get somebody to take your details before you leave here today, and I'll look into the particular class of students that you're talking about and see whether it's something that is within our control to try to change. Because you're right, if somebody has spent their whole childhood in Scotland, done their education in Scotland, lived here for a long time, then on the face of it, of course, they should have the same access to free education as everybody else that they were at school with.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay. Now, I need to do some managing the microphones. There's a very keen hand up the back who held his hand up the entire time during that question. That's you. There you are.
My name's Jackson, and I basically want to ask about the support in place in Scotland in the UK for transgender youth, as it's publicly debated in the media if the NHS should fund treatment for transgender people. If an individual had a tumour growing in their body, there would be no hesitation to remove it. But my body is a tumour to my brain, and it causes me agony each day in its own way. And although the validation of this is questioned, and however it is valid for waiting lists to be 12 months, sometimes even more than that. I've been waiting over a year now just to get help to the gender identity clinic in Glasgow, for over a year now. And that halts this happens to loads of people in Scotland, loads of young people, and it halts thousands of people, it halts them functioning fully in their life. If you want us to grow up in Scotland better, then we can't grow up to productively if we can't be ourselves, basically. So I just want to know what support's in place for the future for this. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that question, and thank you for being brave enough to stand up and ask that question. We don't do enough to help transgender young people be yourselves, and I will freely admit that. So the commitment I'm going to make to you today is that we need to and we will do much, much more. It's not something you should have to fight the system for. It's not something you should have to wait inordinate amounts of time for. We owe it to all of our young people to allow them to grow up, to be themselves and to fulfil their potential. And we don't do that sufficiently well enough right now for transgender young people, and we've got to improve it. So I'm not going to stand here and make you empty promises. What I will tell you though is that I will give you a personal commitment that it's something I will do everything I can to make sure that we get much, much better at over the next few years.
This side here, just third row from the back. Bring the microphone here. There you go, hand up.
Hello. My question's to do with gender in sport. I play rugby, and even at a school level it's quite clear it's unequal. We have to play on different pitches from the boys. Our fixtures are often really unorganised and changed if boys' fixtures are on the same day. And it's even quite clear that if you're not interested in women's rugby, you have no idea what the Six Nations results are, or who won player of the match for the last game, whereas everybody knows who Greg Laidlaw is and what the Six Nations results were for the men. So I was wondering what SNP and you're doing to change that.
Well, the good news is, okay, and I'm not trying to dodge a question here because there is a lot of work still to do, but the good news is there's probably never been a more positive time for women's sport. So women's rugby, to take it as an example, is the fastest growing part of the sport of rugby. Similarly with football, women's football is doing incredibly well. I heard Louise tell you I've just become the patron of the Scottish women's football team to try to do my bit to raise awareness and raise the profile of women in sport. So, actually, and it's down to what people like you are doing, this is actually a really positive time for women's sport. But we've got to do more, and probably the first thing we've got to do is continue to work to change the attitudes. You shouldn't have a situation where you play on inferior pitches or your schedule of games takes second place to the male version of your sport. So that's about changing attitudes. And then actually, in some respects, it's no different to the battle to change attitudes about gender in other walks of life. If you're a female rugby player, then you're an athlete, you're a sportswoman, and what you do is as important and as valued as a man playing the same sport. So we'll continue to do what we can through the governing bodies, through local community clubs to raise the profile and raise the support of women in sport. And I would, and I'm a big supporter of the men's rugby team, and I'm a big supporter of the men's football team before we go any further. So what I'm about to say shouldn't suggest that I'm not. But I actually think we might win a World Cup in rugby or football through the women's teams before we do with the men's team. So let's get right behind them.
In England, it has been found that testing of primary school children has resulted in teachers just teaching to get their pupils through the test. How can you prevent this happening when primary school testing starts in Scotland in 2017?
That's a good question. The reason I can guarantee that won't happen is that's not the kind of testing that we're introducing. We're not introducing tests where a young person passes or fails that test. We're not actually introducing assessments, because most local authorities already do assessments as part of the curriculum for primary school children. What we're doing is making sure that different local authorities are using the same assessments, and they will then become part of what a teacher uses to inform their judgment about how well a young person is performing against the curriculum for excellence level. So it's not a high stakes pass or fail testing approach. It's about using assessment to give an additional, more objective source of information to a teacher who's making a judgment about a young person's progress and whether or not that young person might need a bit more support to meet the required levels of the curriculum. So I think it's the right thing to do. When I became First Minister, I'd never done a job in government in education before. I'd been the Health Secretary. And one of the first things I tried to get my head around when I was First Minister is how well is our education system doing? And when you look at the upper stages of secondary school, there's loads and loads and loads of information that answers that question for you. You've got all the exam results that young people get, but in primary school, there's very little information that actually objectively answers that question. And I think we need to do something about that so that we can, be honest with ourselves about whether we're doing well enough or whether we need to do better. So that's the approach we set out through the new National Improvement Framework, and it will lead to much more information about school performance being published as well, not so that we can have pointless league tables, but so that we can be sure that if there are schools in particular areas that need more support to give their young people the best education, we're getting that support there to them, because it's not good enough. And I make no apology for saying this, it's not good enough in any education system in any country of the world where some of our young people fall behind and don't get the best education when they're young, and I don't want to be the First Minister of a country that lets that happen.
Yes, no, okay, sorry. I was the person that asked about the transition stages from child and adolescent mental health services to adult mental health services. I didn't feel that you addressed the question fully.
Okay.
My question asked, can you create an additional service for 16 to 25-year-olds? Because often, the service doesn't cater, adult services don't cater for younger children or young people or young adults, as the talking therapies and the way they address young people aren't suitable for their needs. And I don't think that vulnerable young people in that position should be made to wait 6 months to be treated from an adult service. So making a service specifically for young people with mental health problems will be better.
Okay, so my apologies, I didn't fully understand, I didn't fully grasp what you were asking me there, so you're right to come back to me on it. Yes, I will undertake to give consideration to that specific point. I think this is a point that it's particularly relevant for mental health services, but actually applies with a lot of physical health problems as well. One of the things when I was Health Secretary we grappled with was the transition across all health services from children's services to adult services. So if you've got a physical health problem, you've maybe spent a lot of your childhood in a children's hospital, either as an inpatient or going regularly as an outpatient, suddenly to find yourself taken out of that with all the support you got there and put into adult services can be very, very damaging. And the same is probably particularly true of mental health services. So that's a point I will undertake to you to discuss specifically with the Health Secretary, so that as we are trying to build up mental health services, the extra investment that I'm talking about, we're paying particular attention to that transition period to make sure you don't, because young people have described it to me, and I don't know whether this is a description you would share yourself. It's like walking off the edge of a cliff when you get to that point, and we've got to make sure that's not the case. So I will, and if you want to leave your details, I'll make sure that we feed back to you on some of our thinking about how we can improve that.
Okay, thank you.
This carpet's really slidey. If I go, I might be about to go flying here.
My name is Cameron Durning, and I'm 16 years old, and I go to Portobello High School here in Edinburgh. And my question from Twitter was read out earlier, but I would like to know in particular As someone who myself identifies as gender fluid, I face discrimination and prejudice every day, and I would like to know how we can support people of minority genders and help us be more represented within society.
Well, the first thing we've got to do, and I, as the First Minister of the country, take particular responsibility for this, we've got to recognise your gender identity. And we've got to recognise that as absolutely valid and support you in making the choices about your gender identity that you want to make. Because some of the problems we get through attitudes, through bullying, through the fact that then services don't support you properly, comes from that initial lack of understanding and acceptance and an awareness. So, you know, the key to this, and it doesn't solve it in and of itself, but the key to solving this is to absolutely unreservedly accept and validate and understand, and then we make it more easy to deal with the other problems that you encounter, and I'm sure on a daily basis sometimes. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
One more. Let's go here, this end. We'll get you there. Get the microphone to you. There you go.
Hello, hi, I'm Kiara, and at the moment at school I'm doing like a project which is investigating or looking at the importance of leadership, of political leaders in determining electoral success. So I just wanted to ask your opinion on whether you think political leaders are really important in determining electoral success for their parties and what role they play.
Yeah. I'll maybe answer that question after the election on May the 5th, when I might have proved it one way or the other. Look, I think political leadership, I think, is important. I think, like any organisation, the leader, the figurehead, the person who's in overall charge is really important, because that, people will make judgments about whether it's a political party or a government or a company based on their judgments about the character and the ability and the leadership qualities of the person in charge. So I think it's very important. But I think, again, in any organisation, but it's certainly true in politics, it's not the only thing that's important. What matters most for a government and a party is the policies and the programme you're putting forward to try to change the country for the better. So it's a combination of all of these things. But leadership, in whatever walk of life you happen to be in, is important. And, you should always strive to demonstrate those leadership qualities in your school, in your community, and in the things you go on to do as you're older. But I'll leave it to other people to judge, in the case of my party, how important or otherwise leadership might be.
Okay, now I know there are so many questions, but as you can imagine, how busy a First Minister's diary is. So
I will take another couple.
Another couple, right, go for it.
Another couple of hundred.
Another couple of hundred. Well, okay, well, I'll tell you what, we'll go here in the middle, one with aisle. Yeah, go.
Thank you.
Okay, go for it.
Okay, thank you. You mentioned earlier that prejudice should never be tolerated, but last month a cross-party committee made the decision to reject a petition from the charity TIE to introduce LGBT-inclusive sex education in Scottish schools. Can you please explain why a parliament with a founding principle of equality rejected a petition that would make our education more inclusive?
Okay, I'm going to start with just being frank with you. I can't explain that decision because the committees in the Scottish Parliament are independent of governments. I'm not on that committee. It would be wrong of me to try to... I didn't hear all of the evidence. I wasn't part of their reasoning. So I'm not going to try and say it was right or wrong or otherwise. What I will say, though, speaking for me, personally, not for the committee or for the Parliament, for me personally, I think inclusive education, inclusive LGBTI education is really important. My party conference took place last weekend, and there was a fantastic debate on this issue led by our youth wing and youth and student wings, and the party backed the motion calling on for inclusive education overwhelmingly. So I believe it's really important. I think it goes back to some of the other questions that have been raised here today about bullying, about transgender support and rights, that if we want to have a society that is inclusive, that doesn't judge people on their background or their sexuality or their gender identity or their race, if we want to have that kind of society, then we've got to start in our education system so that we're educating young people that don't make those judgments, that respects people for their human qualities rather than discriminates against them because of aspects that should have nothing to do with that. So it's a commitment I give you that I will continue, and I'll make sure, if we're still the government, that we will continue to prioritise this kind of thing through our education system.
Thanks. I personally think the housing situation in Scotland is quite bad at the moment due to my own circumstances. Like, I'm homeless myself, and I have been for this year. It's 2 years, and I've been in hostels. I'm actually sofa surfing at the moment, and I've known someone when I was in the hostel who was in for 3 months, and they got a tenancy whilst I was actually in there for about a year and a half, and they got it before me. It was kind of like they got favoritised, and I just, like, it's like a waiting process, and like I've been waiting for 2 years, and I don't know when I'm going to be able to get a house. So I was like kind of wondering if there's anything that like you can do to support like people in my situation. Yeah. So.
Obviously, I don't know all your own circumstances, and I don't know the circumstances of the person that got a tenancy before you, so I'm not able to comment on that just now. Again, if you wanted to leave your details, we could look into it and, you know, direct you to somebody who might be able to give you more help. But the general question is a really important one. We've got a massive housing need. Scotland's not alone here. We've got, you know, the shape of our society is changing. Lots more people will live alone than was the case previously. We've got an ageing population, so the demand for housing is growing, and we've got to make sure we're doing the things that we need to do to meet that demand. So it's not perfect, and we've got a lot of work more still to do, but my government over the past few years, we've been prioritising building more affordable houses. So we've, you know, built 30,000 more affordable homes over the past 5 years, and we've set a target of 50,000 for the next 5 years. And you know, that 50,000 target that I'm talking about, 35,000 of them will be in the social rented sector. So, you know, because affordable homes can include homes that people can buy, you know, on affordable prices. So we need to increase the supply of housing. One of the other things we've done is abolish the right to buy social rented housing. You know, that had its day. I don't pretend it didn't, but when we've got such a demand for housing, when we're having to invest so much in houses for rent, I think it's right that we try to keep that housing available for people to rent. There's all sorts of other ways in which we try to support people into home ownership. So there's a lot of work being done here. We've also changed the law in terms of how homelessness applications are dealt with. There was previously a divide between people who were deemed to be intentionally or unintentionally homeless. We've taken that away. So, you know, look, I'm talking to you in a particular difficult circumstance without a tenancy of your own. So I'm not going to stand here and tell you everything's perfect, but this is probably one of the biggest challenges, and therefore one of the biggest priorities we've got to set over the next few years to increase the supply of houses so that there are houses for everybody who need them.
Okay, we're going for another one. You see, you're all doing brilliantly. See, this is waving a jumper at the back. That just gets extra. Okay. Okay, just one more, okay?
Hi, my name's Shadell and I'm in foster care. What would you do to ensure that you listen out for young care experienced people and stop discrimination?
Well, some of the answer to that is what I spoke about earlier on. We've got to recognise that young people who, through no fault of their own, end up in care or have a period of their young lives in care will suffer disadvantage because of that. So what governments have got to do is try and level the playing field. And that's why I spoke earlier on about our plans to guarantee university places for people with care experience. If you know, as long as they satisfy the basic entry requirements, guarantee bursaries to support you through university education. We've also been trying to improve support for foster carers and kinship carers and make sure that the disadvantages that inevitably come with a period in care, we try to level that playing field as young people get older. So I'd be interested to hear from you and from other people you know who've had care experience of what other things you think it would be important for us to try to do.
Okay, we really will have to bring it to a close. I feel terrible in terms of someone who works for an organisation that's about allowing you to have your say. It feels terrible to have to bring this to a close. But one thing to kind of say is you have a question card. So please, even if you had your hand up or not, use the question card and fill that in and leave that with one of the organisers, and you absolutely are guaranteed an answer to your question. Similarly, if you want to carry on using the hashtag #AskTheFM, then tweet your question there, and again, you're absolutely guaranteed to get an answer. Above the rustle of papers, could all of you just please join with me? I think you've had an amazing kind of amount of time, an incredible experience to be this kind of up close with the First Minister of Scotland. And as she has said, use your voice, go out, find out about the things that matter to you, and have your say, and make sure, not just at the next election, but in all elections, that you absolutely have your voice heard and are taking part, because that's what it's about. It's about that kind of engagement. So join me in thanking First Minister. Thank you. Okay. And remember, folks, there's the exhibition area at the back, so please do carry on if you want to get involved in the robotics and all the activities that are taking place there as well. And thanks to all of our partners for organising it. Thank you.